The ego is a complex psychological concept that plays a crucial role in human personality and behavior. Originally conceptualized by Sigmund Freud as part of his structural model of the psyche, the ego has since been explored and expanded upon in various psychological and spiritual traditions. Derived from the Latin word for I, the ego represents the sense of self, identity, and individuality. Its role and impact, however, vary widely depending on the context: psychological, spiritual, or philosophical. Psychological foundations of the ego. In psychology, particularly in Freudian theory, the ego is part of the tripartite model of the psyche alongside the ID and the superego. The ID represents primal desires and instincts. The superego represents moral and societal standards. The ego mediates between the ID and superego, aiming to balance desires with moral expectations. Key characteristics of the ego include: decision-making component of personality, operates in conscious, preconscious, and unconscious levels, seeks to balance pleasure-seeking with realistic constraints, develops around ages 2 to 3, responsible for sorting out reality and making sense of thoughts and the world. Carl Jung, expanding on Freud's work, viewed the ego as the center of consciousness but distinct from the self, which he believed was a higher, more integrated aspect of the psyche that connected both conscious and unconscious dimensions. Spiritual interpretations of the ego. In spirituality, the ego is often seen as a double-edged sword. It is necessary for creating individuality and self-awareness, but can also become a barrier to spiritual growth when unchecked. The ego as illusion. Many spiritual traditions, particularly those in Eastern philosophies like Hinduism and Buddhism, view the ego as an illusion, Maya, that reinforces the false sense of separateness from the universe or divine. This separateness leads to suffering, dukkha, by fostering attachment, desire, and fear. Ego death. A common goal in mystical practices and psychedelics-based spiritual experiences is the dissolution of the ego, often referred to as ego death. This experience allows individuals to transcend their sense of self, fostering a direct experience of unity with the cosmos or divine. The controlled ego in spirituality. A controlled ego is not eradicated but integrated. It serves as a tool for self-awareness and conscious action without dominating one's spiritual essence. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, and self-inquiry help tame the ego, ensuring it serves rather than leads. Controlled versus out-of-control ego. A controlled ego is characterized by objectivity in self-knowledge and perception of the external world, ability to organize activities over longer time spans, capacity to resist immediate pressures while choosing appropriate courses of action, directing drives into useful channels. An out-of-control ego may manifest as impulsive behavior, sense of inferiority or fragile identity, unstable emotionality, excessive vulnerability, distorted perception of reality and self. Groundbreaking insights on the ego. Neuroscience and the ego. Modern neuroscience suggests that the ego arises from the brain's default mode network, DMN, responsible for self-referential thoughts. Practices like meditation deactivate the DMN, leading to reduced ego-centered thinking and increased feelings of interconnectedness. Ego and altered states. Psychedelic studies, particularly with substances like psilocybin and DMT, have shown that they temporarily dissolve the ego, fostering profound mystical experiences. These findings align with spiritual traditions that aim for ego transcendence through meditation or rituals. Ego in shadow work. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, parts of the psyche repressed by the ego, highlights that integrating the shadow is essential for wholeness. A controlled ego allows individuals to confront their shadow without denial or projection, fostering personal growth and healing. The ego and modern society. In contemporary culture, the ego is heavily influenced by social media and consumerism, which often amplify comparison, external validation, and materialism. This inflated ego disconnects individuals from their authentic selves and their spiritual essence. Ego as a necessary tool. Rather than viewing the ego as inherently negative, many modern spiritual teachers, including Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and Ram Dass, Be Here Now, argue that the ego is a necessary tool. It provides the individuality required to navigate human life but must be transcended to access deeper spiritual truths. Integration, not annihilation, is key. Examples of balanced ego. A scientist who acknowledges the role of their individuality in discovery but remains humble about the vastness of what they don't know. An artist who expresses personal creativity while remaining open to critique and the collective creative spirit. Balancing the ego. Practices and techniques. Mindfulness and meditation. These practices quiet ego-driven thoughts, fostering self-awareness and a sense of connection with the present moment. Self-inquiry. Techniques like asking, "Who am I?" can help individuals see beyond ego-based identities. Acts of service. Helping others without expectation dissolves ego-centered motives, fostering humility and compassion. Journaling. Writing can uncover ego-driven patterns and promote reflection on how to align actions with authentic values. Conclusion. The ego is a paradoxical force. It is both the tool for navigating the physical world and a potential obstacle to spiritual growth. When balanced and controlled, the ego fosters self-awareness, resilience, and individuality, enabling personal and spiritual evolution. However, an unchecked ego leads to suffering, disconnection, and stagnation. Whether approached through psychology, spirituality, or neuroscience, the ego offers profound insights into the nature of self, humanity, and the quest for enlightenment. The ultimate goal is not to destroy the ego but to harmonize it with a deeper sense of being, integrating individuality with universal consciousness.